And here we go again, ReadySetData. I'm Anthony Fortner, data engineer, and with me is Lee Markum, database extraordinaire, database administrator. I'm sorry, every time. Um, Today we're going to have a little chat about data marts, data lakes, data warehouses. We may make a stop off at data swamps because anytime we can mention a pool of data, going for a swim is always, smiled upon. So, especially this lovely weather we've had today, I could have used a
Yes,
pool of water. Now that we gave Canada their weather back,
exactly. I'm glad they should just keep it from now on.
yes, they can keep it. If we borrow weather from anybody, let's go with Hawaii next. Okay, let's borrow their weather. At this point, I
Yes.
take four. Okay, so we're going to be chatting, like I said, about data warehouses, data marts, and data lakes. Have you had interactions with all of the above in your adventures? A subset of that? What's that look like for you?
So I don't have a lot of experience with things outside of OLTP workloads, actually. Um, Years and years ago, I was at a company where the vendor did some pre-built um, data pools and through SSRS, and
Mm-hmm.
we could do reporting through those data sets in SSRS that they had pre-built. I don't really, and I'm thinking, I've been at one other place that actually had a data warehouse, but I didn't do any management of it. I didn't work with the ELT processes or ETL. So no, I mean, I'm very interested in this topic. I want to hear from you, and I'm curious to know what are the differences. Why do we have all these different terms for pools of data? So I'm interested to see what you have to say.
Yeah, there's the more you dig into it, the more names there are: data warehouse, data lake, data mart, data swamp, data vault, operational data store, and then the operational data itself that you know and love, right? That we both
Right.
know and love. This data is collected to allow the business to garner or create insight. The data collected could come from a variety of sources. One key differentiator is the purpose. The data in the data warehouse applies to the entire organization. This makes it a large repository of organizational data. The data mart scope is more limited, typically to one department. The definition of a sale could be drastically different in accounting versus the determinations of a commission for the sale of a car, right?
Hmm.
The data lake is a place to store raw data that might be useful in the future, even if we're not sure yet how we'll use it. This goes well with a store it first, figure out how it can be utilized later mentality.
Okay. Interesting.
So,
Now that
yeah,
the data lake thing, when we're storing raw data, that makes me think of a data swamp, as you mentioned, but that's that's not really a nice technical term, I guess.
no, it's not. It's not a nice technical term. And yeah, like I said, I had a hunch we would bring up data swamps at some point. Yeah, an unmaintained or a vast data lake, no one knows how to find information in, starts getting that negative term, a data swamp. You're dumping tons of data in there, but no one's able to draw insights. So that's
Mm,
the catch-22. Um, with
yeah.
any with any strategy you choose, there's pros and cons, and there is right ways to implement it, right ways to use it, and there's wrong ways. So with the data lake, that's one of the negatives you could have if you're not you don't have a data dictionary showing what things are. You don't track your lineage. You don't have the ways to say, hey, I need to find out how many contacts the call center's made or particular people. Where do I look for that? If there's no information for whomever's trying to draw that insight on where to find that information in the data lake, it won't come across as a positive, right? So then
Yeah.
there's always trade-offs. On the flip side, with the data warehouse, if the data is already there, it's gonna be really easy to find, right? There's gonna be a model for that. But if it's not there, it'll take longer to get that model in there because you'd have to get so many people talking.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
So I have a little a small mnemonic device, because like I sometimes tend to do this if I'm like trying to remember the distinctions between things. It's not foolproof, but so I was thinking data warehouse. You mentioned that it implies to the entire organization. So I was thinking we have the E in the warehouse. We're thinking enterprise. It's enterprise wide. So the data warehouse is enterprise wide. The
Yeah.
data mart, you said, relates to departments. So I thought of how very similar data mart and department are. So data marts are for departments.
The Marts department. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, this is where my head went.
I like it. I like
I
it.
don't have one for data lake yet. I didn't get that far.
Well, if you need all the fish are in the lake. You know it's all there, but to get it, you got to go fishing.
Okay,
So
that's a good one.
that's
I like
mine.
it. Okay,
Is that a good? Is that okay? That's a good.
I like
analogy?
it. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so that's kind of the core purposes or the core, the snippet. We can dive into each one of those a little bit more, right?
Right.
So let's go with the data warehouse. A data warehouse applies to the entire organization and can be a huge repository of data. But creating and maintaining one is a big undertaking. The data needs to be carefully curated and structured, and it takes a lot of time and money to implement. It's important to be aware of the time and resources required for planning and implementation. And that arguably isn't even the difficult part. The difficult part is getting everyone on board and agreeing on what the truth is. Yeah. I
For
think we've lived
sure.
through that once or twice, right?
Yeah.
Getting, when you get a bunch of different people from a bunch of different business areas, departments, whatever you like to call them, discussing what an order is or what a sale is, what counts as I've been in a bank, what counts as a contact, customer service wise. There could be a lot of different opinions, and in some ways they're all correct. But when you're in a data warehouse, there needs to be one definition for the whole organization, and everybody who uses that needs to be aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of interesting to me the first time I went through this process, how many different versions of the truth about data there are, and how people haggle over their version of the truth versus someone else's version of the truth until they can kind of come to an agreement about this is what we're going to say the truth is. And I think those conversations are interesting, amusing, fun, productive, because people learn about their own data or their organization's own data as they talk about it and try to agree on what the truth is. So very interesting observation there for sure. I
Yeah,
agree.
absolutely. Yeah, you can learn a lot from those conversations because once you realize why it's different for them, because they're not talking about the bottom line, they're talking about commissions for salespeople. They're not, they're worried. They're talking about as far as timing on warranty information might be completely different because, well, yeah, the sale was made, but we don't start till something was activated, whatever, depending on the use
Right.
case. You get to double down on what you're saying, you get much more insight into how they operate by understanding that.
Yeah, for sure.
Next up, a data mart can be a subset of a data warehouse, or it can be its own standalone repository. It could be as heavily structured as the data warehouse or full of simpler insights. Either way, it will house data for only one department. This will reduce the amount of data stored in the repository and could reduce the time to define what should be kept in this repository, right?
Right.
No longer what's in here anyone can use. If this is for customer service, if this is for sales, it's going to be from their point of view. But now we've narrowed down the scope of who can use it, but we've increased the time to market on any of this. We have less people who need to make a decision on this. In fact, depending on your organization, it could be a very small subset of people. You'll be getting 2 or 3 people. I'm making up numbers. You'll be getting 2 or 3 people in marketing who will be sitting down with you to plan this out. And they already speak the same language. They already know their day-to-days. and it'll go much more smoothly.
Much
It'll
quicker.
Be a smoother process.
We're very eloquent on this show.
So words good. Yes.
Yeah, I like this observation that the data mart, because it's smaller, because it is focused on a department, a smaller unit within the enterprise. I agree with the observation. Then it's easier to get that going because there are less people who have to haggle over the truth. And as you mentioned, those people already have a common way of talking about this data because they all work with each other. They all work with the same data. And so it's easier for them and quicker for them to come to a consensus about how to present that truth, what data is even the truth. So
next up, the third item, a data lake. A data lake is a large repository of raw data in its original format. There are no transformations, and there isn't a requirement for the purpose of storing the data to be defined yet. The data comes from disparate sources and can be structured, semi-structured, or very likely completely unstructured. There typically is no limit of size or scope. The data lake allows the business to collect and store vast volumes of data without needing to process it or analyze it at all or immediately. I recommend using the data lake concept for quick storage without transformation. Let's get the data into the data lake as soon as possible. So once there is a need, we already have this data available.
we're going to go fishing in the data lake.
Yes, but it's there, right? This strategy is great when you have a team or large group of people who are wanting to get the insights or data quickly. They need to touch the data as soon as possible. If the data is already there, or if the time to get it delivered to a location that they can access, if that time to market's short, then this is the way to go. You get it to them, and then they say, hey, we need this data. You can say it's right there. What I said earlier about making sure you have things documented and you have a data dictionary saying what everything is. It's very helpful for that because, in fact, you can just put that in front of them and they can just go fishing. They know where to look.
Yeah, for sure. So I have a question.
Yeah.
Does this all imply extract, transform, and load, or extract, load, transform? In other words, is ETL or ELT necessary for what we're talking about here?
So I typically believe that is true, right? For the data warehouse, you are removing the data, whether or not you do the transformations in transit, or if you're dropping the data off in some staging area and transforming later, you're getting it out of that operational data store. You're getting it out of the OLTP database, right?
Okay.
So all of these I'm implying is somewhere else. The data warehouse, the data mart, very likely going to be inside of a relational database, or some third party that's handling that for you, something along those lines. And then the data lake is probably literally on a file server. That's not always the case, but that's the probably arguably the most common case here talked about. They are literally taking the data and dropping off as a CSV or a Parquet file on a file server.
Okay.
The data scientists or the analysts, they have to have tooling that can handle that.
So what if this data is in Oracle or AS400 or Cockroach DB or something else that's not SQL Server?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a trick question in there somewhere. Same process. You have to read said data and move it. So,
you though?
What are you alluding to?
So that depends on how much you like the polybase feature in SQL Server.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, yes, the whole topic did make me think of ETL and ELT. So I wanted us to talk about that because
Yeah.
definitely it's important. And those ETL, moving data around, is still going to be the first thing that people think of because that's what we've been doing for years. And because people are skilled with doing it with various platforms, whether that's SSIS or something else. Because of that, though, and the struggle or difficulty related to moving data around, SQL Server developed this polybase concept, this polybase feature that lets you query data where it's sitting. And the great thing is you don't have to know the syntax of the target. So you don't have to know PL SQL for Oracle or the correct syntax for an AS400 source. You could just create a virtual table that looks, feels, and smells like SQL Server. You query it just like you're used to querying. And under the hood, SQL Server uses drivers to translate the query to whatever the target is and return result sets to you. So in a situation where maybe you do have one of these three pools of data, you need data from something that's not SQL Server, even if it's like a data lake where you have CSV files or Parquet, like you mentioned, you could use Polybase to query that without actually having to move the data anywhere.
Yeah, and you're using the term polybase, but some other people might think of something similar but not the same, and maybe you can talk about the differences. Link servers, we both seen that in the past. You can, if you're in SQL Server land, you can make a link server call to SQL Server, arguably other database engines. So, um, yeah, it's the same concept. Instead of carrying the data over, you write a query and you let the two database engines work out the details. Um, are you interested in explaining why Polybase is different? Other than the fact you can read CSVs, as you mentioned, that alone is interesting.
Yeah, so you can actually, I have seen people create a link server like on the fly to an Excel spreadsheet, for example, to read that data. I'm trying to remember specific differences right now. I know that there are performance benefits in most cases for trying to do something like through Polybase versus a link server. But I don't remember beyond that specific differences or reasons why you would use one over the other.
Yeah, I think they call it, and I know I can describe how it works, but I think they call it push down. When you connect from SQL Server to another engine, especially if it knows, like the big players, it'll know how they function, and it'll do. Again, I think it's called push down. I should Google it real quick.
It
but
is,
like,
yes. That's the term.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So when you're querying that data, instead of link servers tended to pull back all the data. I want to query these three tables and join them together, and then I'm gonna join them to data I have available, and then give the results set. It would have to pull all three of those tables into, like, if Lee, you're the external source and I'm the SQL Server in question, I go, Lee, these three tables. You supply those. Those have to stream. If the connection makes that take a whole 30 seconds, a whole 4 minutes, then so be it. It's a half terabyte of data, and now I have all that data, and I have to fumble around, do the join, and send it off. Right. That's why links. That's one of the many reasons link servers get a bad rep for performance. With pushdown, we get to say, hey, when I join this, I just need a subset, or I give you a miniature version or a subquery, or I don't know, I can't get in the weeds and how they pull it off, but you do some of the work on your end and you just give me the data I need. And it can be much, much smaller than what when that predicate gets pushed down, and the results can be is much, much smaller. Therefore, the whole thing ends up being a little bit faster. Did I do that service?
Yeah, you did. That was a good explanation. One of the things that I was thinking about is that um, yeah, it totally just went right out of my head as I was going to try to explain it. I'll come back to that because that thought just went away. Sorry.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah. So you're right. So getting access to the data can be done um, in other ways than moving them off to another repository. I think these three scenarios to me feel like they are the ETL ELT pattern. They are when you want to get the data off the machine so people can do massive transforms and all that. How you get the data off could very well be through the use of link servers, Polybase, other offerings like that. Or if you don't want to go this route and you just want to give someone direct access, you can do the link server or Polybase. I
Right.
know for some of the BI reporting we do, there are some reports that we want to go and get a current right now snapshot of information. So the BI data
Mm-hmm.
flows go straight to the machines. Now in this case, though, we have them hitting a secondary. So that way they're still, I'm trying to protect the primary data source. I'm trying to make sure that the applications are running and not being blocked by anything else, other such considerations. But I give them access to that secondary. Um, yeah, I mean that's something we do in my environment, so it's not far fetched. And maybe if you have a small environment, you can do all of your operations like that, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I finally remembered what I was going to talk about, which is the aspect of joins with Polybase. So with link servers, I'm sure you probably can do joins, but with Polybase, you in the virtualized tables that look exactly like SQL Server, you can join data that is actually sitting in the data mart that's already been moved there to data in an AS400 or whatever by joining to that virtualized table sitting inside your data mart. So you can do joins efficiently or more efficiently that way as well, using that Polybase and in data virtualization, which they continue to make improvements to even in SQL Server 2022.
Yeah, that came out 2016. Am I off base? 17.
Polybase was, I think, 16.
Okay.
You have anything
Um,
else on
nope. That
those
was that.
distinctions?
Yeah, that was just I want to cover all three, get a ground level examination of the three, and see what it took us. So that covers it basically. Um, just to roll everything up. Data warehouse takes a lot of time to put together because you are getting all the data in, whether it's dimensional or some other strategy, all the data modeled out. So once someone needs that data, they can connect to it and get their insights quickly. They don't need special tribal knowledge. You can, ideally get any data professional, any analyst or data scientist. They can connect to it. They can take off running, right? The data mart doesn't necessarily have to be as modeled. I tend to believe it should be, um, but it's domain specific. It's for a particular, let's say, department or business unit. That way, the people who utilize that know the data is set up for them, um, and maybe even own that data. So other people have to come to them for it, and when they come to them, they know that customer service or sales or operations have signed off on it. And the data lake is a place where data gets dumped. It's a place where if data might possibly be needed, we can take it and place in the data lake, and they can have access to it. I've used the term plenty of times. If the data is ready on day zero, so I any relevant information I can place in there, or the other data teams, the people who might need it might say, "Hey, this came up. We probably want this in the data lake," and we can get to them very quickly. So the day that the question's asked, that expects that insight, day one, we can say it's already there. It was there on day zero, right? that speed, but it's up to them to make sense of it. But that's
Yeah, for
the
sure.
core three. That's the three biggest data repositories you're going to run into as far as on the BS side of things, right? It tends to be one of those three that people are talking about. So that's it.
I'm going
That's it for
to
this
drop a
run.
link in the comments here.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry. So I was going to drop a link in the comments to a blog post I did on using this feature related to data virtualization and Polybase to kind of give you the readers, the viewers, and people watching us now. So an example, something they can look at or go to about Polybase and how that might fit into this really interesting discussion on differences about what's a data warehouse, a data mart, and a data lake. What are they used for, and that sort of thing. I really love this topic. This is a great topic.
Awesome. The next one up is going to be related, so hopefully that one goes as well. Goes good as well. So thanks everyone for joining us for this, and those of us who see this after the fact. I appreciate you watching with us. Feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. Feel free to watch us, whether it be on LinkedIn, Twitch, or Twitter, and then join Discord if you want to yell at us, tell us what we got wrong. Should Lee have said data swamp at all? I mean, what's with that judgment, right? Yeah. So reach out, tell us what you'd like us to talk questions, or just yell at us. But whatever, we're here to be your punching bags. Thanks for joining us tonight. This was ReadySetData. I'm Anthony Fortner, data engineer, and with me is
Lee Markum, database administrator.
Awesome. Thanks everybody. Y'all have a good night.